Othello forgot about this and interpreted what he saw from his own emotional perspective. If you can tell from somebody's face that she is angry, it doesn't necessarily mean she's angry at you. She could be angry at herself or simply remembering a previous occasion when she was angry, which has triggered the same emotion now. Remember the 9 emotional triggers discussed earlier in this chapter. So, if you're going to let the emotional expressions you see in others affect your own behavior, you should first make sure you also know the cause of their emotions. The best thing to do is usually to keep quiet about what you've seen and keep an eye out for the opportunities this knowledge will offer you. I will go into more detail on how Ekman suggests you approach each specific emotion, but most of Thesk's methods involve giving the other person a subtle opening to express how she feels, rather than a direct confrontation, and the emotion you have noticed is rarely mentioned at all. I get the impression you might be having some feelings we haven't spoken about yet. Is that right? Sometimes, however, you shouldn't comment at all. There are 3 different categories of subtle facial expressions, which can all indicate a conscious attempt to hide a strong emotion. The first 2 can also indicate an openly displayed but weak emotion, or that an emotion, which may come to growth strong, has only just been triggered. 1. Slight expressions. The whole expression is displayed, but with low intensity. 2. Partial expressions. Only part of the expression is displayed, the eyebrows. 4. Example. 3. Micro expressions. The whole expression is displayed with intensity, but only for an extremely brief moment. Neutral. The picture in this section is of me several years ago, on an ordinary morning in November. That's what I look like when my face is completely relaxed. All faces look different, and some have properties that can make you think they are expressing an emotion even when they're not. As you can tell, I have pretty thin lips and a relatively small mouth. The corners of my mouth also have a slight downward curve. This means people who don't know me can often get the idea that I am angry about something when I am simply relaxed, because thin lips is one of the attributes that reveal anger. For this reason, unless it is completely obvious, you should never believe that someone you've just met is in a certain emotional state. It could just be how he or she looks. So, before you can read my emotions, you need to know what I look like when I am relaxed, or you won't have anything to compare my expressions with. Neutral. Oh, look, another season of The Kardashians. Each of the following 7 emotions will be presented with a picture of a complete facial expression in which the emotion is expressed as purely as possible. The expression will, for clarity's sake, be strong, even though these expressions are seldom this strong in everyday life. The complete expression is then broken down into its various components. Surprise. Surprise is the emotion we feel for the shortest time. So let's begin there. When are we surprised? When something unexpected happens. When what we think is about to happen suddenly turns out to be something else. We mustn't have a clue about what is about to happen, because then we wouldn't be surprised. Surprise only lasts for a few seconds, until we understand what just happened. Then, it turns into another emotion, which is a reaction to the thing that surprised us. At this point, we might say, what a nice surprise, but in actual fact, the surprise in itself has no value one way or the other. The joy we feel is what comes after we understand what happened, like an unexpected visitor coming to our house. Surprise. Complete expression. OMGI. Since surprise occurs when we're not prepared for it, we basically can never hide it, even if we wanted to. Getting surprised is usually not a problem, unless the object of our surprise was known to us from before. Of course, surprise doesn't occur just when we're startled and flinch, as we do when we hear loud, unexpected noises. For example, that is simply a physical reflex, which actually looks like the opposite of surprise. We scrunch up our faces and curl up to protect ourselves. When we're surprised, our faces open up as much as they can. Surprise affects 3 areas in the face in a distinctive way. Surprise. Eyebrows and forehead. The eyebrows are arched up high. More of the skin under the eyebrows will show, and horizontal wrinkles will appear on the forehead of anybody who isn't rather young. People who already have those wrinkles when relaxed will have deeper, more distinctive wrinkles. If somebody just displays his or her eyebrows the way I do in the picture, without corresponding action in the mouth and eyes, it no longer signals surprise. And if the eyebrows stay in place for a few moments, that means you're doubting, questioning or feeling astonished at what you're hearing. It could be a serious expression or not, like in situations where you simply can't believe what you've just been told. As you can see in the picture, my whole face seems to express this kind of questioning attitude, even though the only thing that's different is the eyebrows. The picture is actually a clever montage of the neutral expression and the total surprise picture. The eyebrows and forehead are taken from the surprised face, and the rest is from the neutral face you saw earlier. All images on the following few pages are made in the same way, with a neutral image used as the base, and the specific parts of the face added in. As you can see, lots of facial expressions are changed completely, and express completely different emotions, when just one small part of the face changes. It also seems as though a person who is asking a question she already knows the answer to, or who is asking a rhetorical question, will tend to accentuate the question by raising her eyebrows. On the other hand, if she doesn't know the answer, the lowered, contracted eyebrows, which indicate concentration, but are often mistaken for anger, will be displayed. Try it yourself. Ask the question, how are we going to solve this? Once with your eyebrows lowered and once with your eyebrows raised. Notice how the question's undertone changes from one of the collaborative, problem-solving, lowered eyebrows, to a much more confrontational one, raised eyebrows. Surprise. Eyes. As you can see in the picture, the eyes are open wide, the upper eyelids are raised, but the lower ones are relaxed. The whites of the eyes, above the iris, the colored membrane that surrounds the pupil, will be visible in many people. Sometimes you can also see the white of the eye below the iris, but this depends on how deeply set the eyes are and on whether the skin under the eyes is stretched out when the mouth is open. The wide open eyes are most often displayed along with either raised eyebrows or an open mouth or both, but they can also occur in isolation. Then they are part of a very brief expression, one of increasing interest, the kind of thing that makes us say wow. Surprise. Mouth. When we first become surprised, our jaw literally drops and our mouth opens. How much depends on the strength of the emotion. Surprise comes in varying degrees of intensity, and how surprised somebody is will often be most clearly expressed by the mouth. Eyes and eyebrows always look more or less the same, but the more open somebody's mouth is, the greater the surprise is. When all you can see is an open mouth, that's what they call being dumbstruck. It could be an unconscious expression of a legitimate emotion, or a conscious signal that is intended to display the emotion. When we want to hide our real feelings, we often feign surprise, but real surprise lasts for such a short time, you can't really use it to cover anything up. The clue that gives away feigned surprise is usually that it lasts for too long. Surprise is the quickest emotion and should only be apparent for a few seconds before passing into a different emotion. Sadness. Sadness or sorrow is one of the longest lasting emotions. When I use the word sorrow, I don't mean the sort of extreme expression that sometimes finds an outlet at funerals. For instance, all emotions have an extreme form of expression. The extreme form of fear, for instance, is phobia. What I am referring to are the more commonplace expressions of emotional states. Sadness. Complete expression. You had me at hello. There are many things that can make us unhappy, but it usually happens when we lose something. It could be that we lose our self-confidence after failing at something at work. We could be rejected by a friend or partner. We could have lost a limb in an accident. Someone could have died, of course. Or perhaps we've lost some possession that we're particularly fond of. We say that we're feeling low, depressed, sad, disappointed, miserable, helpless, or desperately unhappy. We become passive and withdrawn, which allows us to save our energy and rebuild our strength. But we have a tendency to get sadness and anger mixed up. We become angry with those who have made us unhappy, as a form of defense. Sadness also has a social function, because a person who displays signs of being sad will often receive help, comfort, and reassurance from others. For some reason, many men absorbed a peculiar tradition when they grew up, that we shouldn't let anybody see that we are sad. A lot of people will therefore do all they can to conceal their feelings when they're sad. But this doesn't mean that they will succeed, they probably won't, because facial expressions occur involuntarily. They appear even when we don't want them to. People who are trying to suppress their emotions almost always show visible leakage. Sadness, eyebrows, forehead, and upper eyelids. In its most extreme form, the only sign of sadness or sorrow could be a lack of muscle tension in the face, but most often there will be a reaction in the brow and forehead. The inner parts of the eyebrows are contracted and raised. Note that the whole eyebrow is not pulled up, just the inner end. This is one of the most difficult muscular movements to make consciously. I call it Woody Allen eyebrows, because it seems to be a more or less permanent feature on his face. The movement of the eyebrows also means that vertical wrinkles between the eyebrows will be created or deepened, and that the inner corners of the upper eyelids will be raised and acquire a triangular look. Some people will raise their eyebrows very discreetly. It can be such a slight difference that it is invisible, particularly if the person is trying to hide the expression, but the triangle in the eyelids will still be evident. So if you're not sure, you can always check for that. The opposite holds, too. If you see the triangle in the eyelids of someone who seems to be in a neutral mood otherwise, it's a sure sign that he is starting to feel sad, or that he is very sad but trying to hide it as best he can by controlling his facial expression. Apart from this, the eyelids of somebody sad will hang down lower than otherwise. This movement is most often seen alongside the expression in the rest of the face, but it can be displayed alone, like in the picture. Sadness, lower eyelids. If the sadness is particularly deep, the lower eyelids will also be affected and tense up. Sadness, mouth. A sad mouth is often confused with the expression used to show contempt. The corners of a sad mouth will point down, and the lower lip might be protruded as we pout. Wrinkles can appear in the skin of the chin. The difference is that when we feel dislike or contempt, our upper lip is raised, even if the corners of the mouth are turned down. We don't pout with our lower lip when expressing contempt. If only a sad mouth is visible, as in the picture, it's actually impossible to know what the person is really feeling. This is one of the few occasions when a single element of a facial expression isn't enough to tell you what the underlying emotion is. Sadness, looking down. In this picture there is a new characteristic. Lowered eyes are often seen in sad people. Of course, We look down several times a day without necessarily feeling sad, but if we do so while displaying the sad eyebrows, as in the picture, the signs are very clear. Something else that can often happen is for the cheeks to be raised, which makes the eyes narrower than usual. If someone who isn't sad is pretending to be, she will show it in the lower regions of the face, particularly the mouth, and by looking down, the lack of any signs of sadness in the eyes, eyebrows, and forehead are a good indication that this is a false emotion, unless you're dealing with one of those rare people who don't use that part of the face to express sorrow. Of course, they do exist, but there aren't many of them. In order to make sure that it's a genuine expression, you should start by looking for the triangular shape in the upper eyelids. If someone is feeling sad but trying to hide it, she will generally concentrate on not letting her mouth give her away. The triangular eye, and usually the eyebrows as well, will still be there for you to recognize. Anger. The most common reason we get angry is because something or somebody is stopping us from doing what we want to do. When there's somebody in our way, and we get angrier still if the obstacle is meant for us personally. But we can also become frustrated when things don't work the way they should, which is actually just another case of things getting in our way. We also get angry with ourselves sometimes. Another triggering cause could be violence or threats of violence. That can make us both angry and scared. Of course, we also get angry when people act in ways we disapprove of or let us down. We don't feel anger. Complete expression. 2 versions. I told you to stop hitting your brother. Pure anger for particularly long, it tends to get mixed up with some other emotion, like fear or contempt. Anger is the most dangerous emotion, as it can make us try to harm the person we're angry with, physically or emotionally. The urge to want to hurt others arises when we are very young and is something we all have to learn to control as we grow up. So what is getting angry good for? Then, anger activates us and motivates us to change the thing that has angered us. The problem is to understand just what it was that made us so angry in the first place. Often, we direct our anger toward the wrong things. Taking action when you're angry is almost always a foolish thing to do. When you're angry, everything is interpreted and perceived through that anger. Actually, in these situations, the best thing to do is to shut up and not act at all, until the emotion starts to fade and we become capable of a more nuanced perception of things again. If we are exposed to any kind of threat, anger can help, too, since it limits fear, and fear can stop you cold. Getting angry will make you deal with the threat instead. Apart from the other expressions, anger requires a change in all 3 facial arcs. Otherwise, we can't tell if the person is experiencing anger or something else. Anger. Eyebrows. When we get angry, our eyebrows contract and are lowered. Lines can appear between the eyebrows, but the forehead won't wrinkle. If you see this motion occur on its own, that could mean several different things. The person is angry but trying to hide it. The person is slightly annoyed or starting to get angry. The person is serious or concentrating. The person is confused. If somebody does this while you're speaking to her, and you haven't just introduced a difficult problem to her, it's a sign you may need to explain yourself more clearly, since she obviously has to concentrate hard to follow what you're saying. Darwin called the muscle responsible for this contraction the muscle of difficulty. It seems as though we use it anytime we're confronted with something difficult or incomprehensible. Anger. Eyes and eyelids. When we're angry, the eyelids tense up and the eyes become set in a piercing stare. The lower eyelid can be more or less raised, depending on how angry you are. Thanks to the downward pressure from the eyebrow, the upper eyelid looks like it's been lowered, which makes the eyes narrower. If somebody displays these eyes and nothing else, it could mean contained anger, but it could also mean the person is trying to focus or concentrate. Even if the telltale shapes of both eyes and eyebrows are present, the expression could still be one of concentration as well as anger. But when the eyes tense up, it's usually a case of visual concentration, more specifically, like when we need to focus our vision on something. To make sure it actually is anger, we also have to be able to see the mouth. Anger. 2 different kinds of angry mouths. There are 2 kinds of angry mouths. The closed one, with the lips pressed together, is used for physical attacks, in a fight, or when you are trying to hold back something you really want to say. Then there is the open mouth, which is used, often loudly, for letting everybody know how angry you are. If only the mouth is displayed, it's hard to say what it means. A closed mouth can indicate slight anger, or controlled anger, but, just like the eyebrows, it could also indicate concentration or exertion. This time, it's not a case of mental exertion, however, it is physical, like when you lift something heavy. But the closed, tight mouth is one of the first signs to appear when somebody begins to get angry. It's easy to see the whole jaw section tense up. Often we will display this even before we've noticed that we're getting angry. It's hard to know if anger is faked, since the expression uses muscles that are easy to control consciously, and everybody knows how to do it. For once, we also tend to remember to use the eyebrows when we fake this emotion. To determine if it's fake, you need to look at timing instead. Is the expression simultaneous with the words or actions? Or is it delayed? Anger is actually the best mask to wear to hide another emotion, because we lock up our whole faces, leaving only the eyebrows as clues to our true emotional states. Fortunately, We live in a culture where walking around wearing an angry face all day doesn't help you much, even though some people seem to try. If somebody is angry but tries to hide it, his anger will show through in the tension of his eyelids, his stare, or his contracted eyebrows. Fear. Fear is the emotion we know the most about, for the simple reason that it is easy to make animals frightened in experiments. Fear is triggered by a danger of harm, physical or emotional. Examples of things that trigger fear are objects moving quickly toward us, or when we lose our footing and fall, both literally and metaphorically. Threats of pain, like knowing you have to go to the dentist, can trigger fear, too. Most, but not all, of us are easily frightened by snakes and reptiles, or of the thought of losing our footing at heights. In biological terms, fear prepares us for either hiding or running away. Blood flows into the larger muscles in our legs, preparing us to run if we need to. If we don't run, we try to hide. But hiding means doing it the same way animals do, like deer freezing in headlights. That might seem like a strange way to react, but it makes sense, as in predators with bad eyesight can't make you out if you don't move. When we say we're going numb with fear, it's really about hiding. If we can neither run nor hide, it is very likely our fear will turn into anger instead. So in other words, if the command that orders the nervous system to prepare for flight or hiding doesn't seem useful, we will switch it for one that mobilizes us for action. In order to deal with the situation, we get angry with whatever has threatened us. Our facial expressions when we're afraid signal two things: there is danger nearby, be careful, and help, get me out of here. In this case, it's a good thing we have our facial expressions, because speech often fails us when we get strongly emotional about something. As Winnie the Pooh's friend Piglet put it, help, help, a horrible hoffalumple hoff, a hellable horrorlumple hole, a hoffable helly rump. The eyebrows are raised but stay straight when we display fear. So, as with surprise, the eyebrows are raised but also contracted, which makes the inside corners come closer together than in surprise. They aren't as raised as with surprise, either. Wrinkles appear in the forehead, too, even though in cases of fear they most often won't go all the way across the forehead. If the eyebrows display without the other facial signals, they signify concern or controlled fear. Now, in this picture, my whole face looks worried, but it is a montage, where everything below the eyebrows is from the original neutral picture. The eyes are open and tense, just as with surprise. The upper eyelids are raised, so we can see the whites of the eyes, but in this case, the lower eyelids are tensed up, instead of being opened, and can cover a portion of the iris. Often, the tense eyes and the raised eyebrows are displayed together, as shown in this case, or with both the eyebrows and the mouth, but they can appear on their own. If that happens, it will be very quick and is an indication of a genuine fear that is either moderate or controlled. The mouth is open or almost closed, the lips are tense and can be drawn back, as opposed to the more relaxed mouth we have in surprise. If only the mouth is displayed, it means anxiety or worry. If the closed, fearful mouth is displayed alone, quickly, that can mean you're afraid and trying not to show it, or that you're remembering an occasion when you were afraid, or using it as a conscious illustration in the context of a conversation. Like when you go, "Whoa, that was scary." When somebody pretends to be afraid, as usual, chances are she will forget to use her eyebrows and forehead and just use the mouth. She'll probably also forget to use her eyes. If you see just the eyebrows signal fear in somebody's face, perhaps because she is trying to display a different emotion than fear with the rest of her face, that is actually a sufficient and genuine sign of fear. The only time the forehead and eyebrows aren't included in a genuine expression of fear would be when it is a matter of truly paralyzing fear, like in cases of shock. Then, only the eyes and mouth are used. Disgust. Follow these instructions. Swallow once. Now to make your mouth dry, wait for a moment, until you feel you produce new saliva. It will probably take a little while. Ready? Okay? Now imagine spitting this new saliva into a glass, and then drinking it. I use this thought experiment, which is inspired by emotions researcher Paul Ekman. When I give lectures, my suggestion is usually met by the facial expression on page 115. Disgust, or revulsion, characteristically involves being repelled by something, like the taste of something you want to spit out right away. Just the thought of eating certain things can make you feel disgust. The same is true of certain smells or the way slimy things feel. Some actions can cause disgust, like mistreating pets or abusing children. The most universal triggers of disgust are actually bodily excretions, feces, bodily fluids, blood, and vomit. The emotion isn't triggered until they exit the body. Like in the saliva test mentioned earlier, as long as the saliva was in your mouth, there were no problems. The only difference between the first and second time I asked you to swallow your saliva was that the second time, it had been outside of your body for a short time, and presto, now you're disgusted. Disgust doesn't start happening to us until we are 4 or 5 years old, but from that point on, it fascinates us completely. That's why novelty stores sell fake vomit, why we like movies like Dumb and Dumber and American Pie, and why so many people inspect their handkerchiefs after blowing their noses. As adults, we believe ourselves to mostly feel disgust for other people who commit moral wrongs, politicians, bullies, and so on. However, What is considered a moral wrong can vary between different cultures and mindsets.